I think it's time to get into our deep dive for LSU at Clemson.
Sure. The battle for Death Valley, right? Um, so
Trademark
both
TM. We came up with that. Battle for Death Valley. I mean, yeah, we came up with that.
Yeah. Nice. So let's talk about it, right? Both teams are looking for something to prove to America. They're trying to prove that they're capable of redemption.
hmm
They're trying to prove that they can win by being resilient.
hmm
Um, two very, very key words. Both of these programs look like they were ready to take over college football at one point in time. As Nick Saban was getting older, and you had the feeling that they were, you know, only a few. There was only a few years left at this point to become dominant. Mash, your thoughts?
It's pretty well known. LSU has lost 5 straight home openers. That goes back to the Coach O, to the last coach.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, shout out to LSU for scheduling quality opponents. On another hand, what does that do to the mentality of your team, for the rest of the season? As for Clemson, Clemson has some seemingly regressed almost every year since 2019, which happens to be the last time, both of these teams played in the national championship. That regression can almost be pointed to the fact that they did not adapt to the way the game changed. The game has changed with NIL and the transfer portal.
Mm-hmm.
So exploring the theme of redemption, right? That means something has to change. If you need to redeem yourself, something has to change. So this year, what is new this season for these teams?
Okay, sure. So there's a lot new for both of these teams, right? But in different ways. So for LSU, they've got a new offensive coordinator, Joe Sloan. He was internally promoted. On the
hmm
field, they plugged in a lot of holes from last year. It had a lot to do with their top-rated portal class, as we mentioned before. Some of the key additions they needed help with. On the defensive line and edge, you got Patrick Payton. He's a transfer from FSU, day one starter on the edge.
hmm
Um, at wide receiver, you got Nick Anderson from Oklahoma. He set Oklahoma's freshman record for touchdown receptions. And I think he's a really, really big physical receiver. I think he's 6'4". You have, the replacement for Mason Taylor. He went in the second round last year. So they definitely added some depth with, the transfers we mentioned and more SEC transfers. They did not add a running back, an area in which they struggled in last year. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see how dominant their run game will or will not be.
hmm
You Um, let's get into Clemson. So for Clemson, they dabbled in the
Yeah.
transfer
Dabo
portal.
dabbled. Dabo
Dabbled.
dabbled.
Yeah, that's right. He dabbled. He added 3 guys, so emphasis on
Yeah.
dabble.
Yeah.
He got one DN, one linebacker, and one receiver. More importantly, they added Tom Allen from Penn State. Clemson, of course, they had a bit of a dip on the defensive side of the ball after Brent Venables took the head coaching job at Oklahoma. Natural degradation. And this is probably one of the best hires you can make in order to fix that problem. He did great things at State College, and I imagine he'll do the same in Clemson. So in order to win with resilience, these teams will need to lean on their strengths and continue to build on that. Question for you.
Mhm.
What worked well last year for these teams that they'll need to lean on this year?
Right. So if they're being resilient, that means right, they're trying to push through, they're trying to use what they're good at to continue on their path, right? So for both of these teams, their biggest returning strength is going to be the quarterback. Especially this year with so many of the top programs starting a new quarterback. These teams can rely on their returning quarterback. So I'll start with Clemson. Cade Klubnik, staple name, in college football for this year. He's matured into a veteran quarterback, I think, who understands Garrett Riley's system. They've been at it for 3 years now. He had a 36 touchdown to 6 interception ratio last year. Pretty good. He also rushed for 7 more touchdowns. So he can, throw the ball. He can run. He can also rely on Antonio Williams, who was his leading receiver from last year. Defensive line for Clemson this year, as has been for years, in the past. It's one of the biggest strengths on this team, touted as one of the best in the nation, right up there with Texas. Best player on that line is probably going to be Peter Woods, defensive tackle. And this is a guy. This is a guy who will most likely be a first-round draft pick. So make sure you keep that name in mind as Clemson plays this year. For LSU, they're going to have to lean extra hard on Garrett Nussmeier, while he is also a Heisman favorite alongside Cade Klubnik. He's going to have to be the returning piece that will have to be like the glue that gets all the mechanisms of the offense to work together. Um, LSU was fifth in passing yards per game in the SEC last year, but they were near the bottom of the list when it came to rushing. And so, when Aaron mentioned they didn't get a running back out of the portal, that I don't know, that seemed like an oversight to me. Typically, a team's rushing game, opens up a passing game. This year, it seems like LSU will have to rely on the passing game to open up the running game. This sounds crazy. This sounds backwards, but it was actually a very similar case of how 2019 LSU became as dominant as they were. So we'll see. They're also going to have to lean extra hard on Harold Perkins. He had an amazing freshman year a couple years ago, but he was unfortunately injured last year. He will be playing the star position, but I'm very excited to see how he bounces back. Again, he was one of my favorite players when he was a freshman a couple years ago. So that's kind of, the themes that we explored, themes that will come up for both of these teams in this game. We're going to make some picks. I'll let Aaron go first.
Sure. So when LSU steps onto Memorial Stadium, it won't just be about another season opener. It'll be a statement game. And if the Bayou Bengals are going to break their 5-year week 1 curse, it'll be because of their explosive offense. Talk about resilience. Garrett Nussmeier is primed to be a breakout with one of the strongest, deep arm threats and receiving cores in the nation, right?
Mm-hmm.
LSU's game plan will be aggressive from the jump, letting Nussmeier cook, and against the Clemson defense that, while is talented, is still adjusting under the new coordinator. If LSU can keep a high tempo and capitalize on big plays, I think they'll leave Death Valley with a win, and they'll leave with a whole lot of momentum.
Mm-hmm.
I got LSU winning, and my score prediction is 45-38. Bayou Tigers.
Okay. That's,
Yeah.
yeah. Is that, would you consider that an upset? I guess it could be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for me, I am going to go a different way again. Maybe one day we'll agree on our picks. While a top transfer class is impressive, there's just too much unknown for LSU, especially on the defensive side. Clemson's defense can show up when it needs to. Last year it was a little inconsistent, but when they need to show up, they can. And, if LSU is already going to be favoring one dimension of their offense more than the other, Clemson can easily make their offense even more one-dimensional. And that's going to be a difficult hole for that offense to, climb out of.
Mm-hmm.
While Clemson's rushing attack is a question mark this year with Phil Maffa in the NFL now, we can at least assume they will try to be a more balanced attack. So I think Clemson will not only redeem themselves from the loss in 2019, but I think it'll also go a long way in showing the nation that their resilience in deciding not to change how they construct their team just because everyone else does can pay
Mm-hmm.
off by beating one of the powerhouse programs within the SEC. I've got Clemson 41-34.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting take.